New client 2324 prepared, not filed. I like this question. Brand new client for 2025. I just found out that the 23 and 24 returns I reviewed were never filed. Is my client in trouble? And is there any way to fix this for them? Now, this brings up to me a list of questions. My first question is, David, when you're reviewing those returns, as a standard practice, new client, you come in and review the prior year's returns. What are the things that are going to jump off to you, potentially whether or not these are okay to file?
Well, the first thing is, are there any statute-related issues with regards to elections that are time-sensitive? Certain regulatory elections you can file late within 12 months of the due date. Some are strict due date elections. In the case of certain corporate elections, like, for example, an asset sale under 336, that's strict statutory election, and if you blow it, you need to get a PLR. Right. Sticking to the individual level, are there any foreign informational forms with a mandatory late filing penalty associated with it? Those start at $10,000 and just get gnarlier and gnarlier from there. And I think the other part of it is there isn't a lot of love in the court system historically, going all the way back to Boyle, but even in the 11th Circuit 3 years ago, where the e-filed return, the preparer didn't hit the send button. And the court basically said, we understand that this is a problem, but Boyle holds, too bad, so sad. Right. And that still holds today. And I don't think it's entirely fair, but at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't govern what the courts do.
Thank God.
I just want to tag on that. I want to tag on that real quick. How many of you use a software that give you an acknowledgement of submission? Very good. How many of you print that out and give that to your client? Get in the habit, because that after that case came out, anybody that I didn't give to in the past, I gave to then because something happened to me. They have that proof that that return was filed. Because how many of you this year have had a client get a letter from the IRS that said the return wasn't filed, and you got proof that it was filed? Right? I had 3 of them. Laura's had them. Forget the ones that paid the tax online, and the IRS is sending a letter for the bill. So unfortunately, the IRS is a little confused, and their computer systems are even more confused. So we're seeing these letters. That's our support. Let's move back to the point here. Laura, when you're reviewing those returns, what would stop you? Well, let's assume that these were professionally prepared. I don't know if that were the case in this situation, but let's assume they're professionally prepared. How would you address this with your client? If you saw something on a 23 and 24 return that you may not have done quite right or quite the same way as was done by that other preparer?
One of the things I absolutely want to know is, why wasn't it filed? Right. Was there an issue where somehow they got a copy of the return but didn't pay for it? So is it really a final return or not? If it is a case of a professional prepared it, and there's things on it I think are a little dicey, I might actually suggest, you know what, this hasn't been filed. I would do it differently. I'm sorry you already paid someone to do this, but before we file 25, I want all of your information, and we're going to start from 23 at scratch. Bring me 22 so I can compare it to transcripts, make sure what you're bringing me is what the IRS has, because now I'm thinking things are a little funky here. Once I've verified, yes, 22 is filed, the information I have is correct, I'm actually going to have that client engage me from 23 forward.
Okay. Now, Mark, is the client in trouble? That was one of the questions. Is the client in trouble?
So I keep this Monopoly card in my desk that says, go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Now, a non-filer here for 2 years is not really something that's showing a pattern of fraudulent behavior. It's more likely either someone didn't pay their prior preparer, or they had a disagreement, or something came in late. It's not likely taking them to the point where they have a real problem, other than perhaps penalties for failure to file or failure to pay if there were actually balances due. So if there's no balances due, it's almost as if it's a no harm, no foul, except for potentially late elections, late filed forms. I guess the dollar penalty for the foreign forms really, you don't have that issue of balance due, but still, they're not going to jail for this, but they have an issue of compliance that needs to get addressed.
So, Tom, in your opinion, would you think that if this returns looked good? Now, I said yesterday, and I will say this over and over again, there's no such thing as a perfect tax return. I've never seen one. But if these returns passed your scratch and sniff test, would you advise your clients to simply put them in the mail and get this past you?
Yeah, I think if the returns looked good, they have the copies to file, there's no reason not to file it at that point. Ideally, they would be e-filed, but if that's not available, paper filing, sadly, is still an option. I'm not going to re-prepare the return, especially if it was prepared by somebody else. I'm simply just going to mail the return that was not mailed or filed, submit it, and then we go from there.
And I think, if possible, I'd actually try to get them to go back to the prior preparer to hit the send button, because I don't want them to file a paper tax return.
Right.
That is horrible to send paper to the IRS, especially if someone really has the option of just hitting that send button. And that might bring out the reason why they haven't been filed, because there wasn't a payment or something else, so it might add to that story. But I don't want to send paper to the IRS and then hope that they can catch up with it so I can get my next return in line.
Laura, are you an ERO?
Am I what?
An ERO?
Yes.
Would you take that tax return prepared by this other party and file it
And then
under-
just transmit it?
transmit it?
Wow, back in the day when e-file was new, I was also new, and I did things like that. Now, I don't want the responsibility of something that I'm not 150% sure of. I probably wouldn't, unless it was a re-engagement. And I realized as we were talking about this, I actually have had this actual situation come up. And the return that was prepared, the preparer that didn't hit send filed the return incorrectly, leaving off some foreign income because
Oh,
you don't have to pay taxes on it. Normally, I avoid foreign like the plague, and I have phone a friends, some of whom are sitting with me at this table, that I say, oh, yeah, you need to talk to them. This was one where I verified with one of my phone a friends what the proper situation was, and then I re-prepared the return correctly. And in my case, because of how I've got maybe too big a heart, I did it pro bono. I sometimes act like a charity, but I did take pride in fixing the problem right and not just having her go back to the preparer. However, I did suggest in this particular case, you can rat him out.
unless that preparer, I really hate to say this but it is what it is. Unless that preparer is regulated under Circular 230, ratting them out will only get you satisfaction, but no real action. I ran into a ghost preparer, had all the information, turned him into the IRS and the FTB, and he's still running amok.
So in this particular case, it was the fourth or fifth return that I'd had from that preparer in 12 months that had egregious issues, like W-2 employees that now have Schedule Cs with just expenses.
Oh, cool.
That are really fake. Yeah, there's fraud. And that's where I'm like, okay, you guys need to start turning this person in. I went to their website. On their website, I found that they were claiming to be a CPA. I looked them up in the CPA California board. They don't exist. Guess who actually does take action? The IRS can be a little on the slow side. I have a friend that works for TIGTA, and I asked him, do you want this? And he said, yes, I do, but I can't promise you that we'll do anything, and I can't follow up with you at all. However, the CPA board, they go after people. Do not pretend to be a CPA. Do not do things bad as a CPA. They will take action.
David, you brought up a couple things earlier, when we first started the conversation, and on things to be looking for on this returns. that potentially could be detrimental to the taxpayer. And something came to my mind just because my mind rolls in all different directions a lot of times. And and these are things that we may not necessarily think about, which is why I'm bringing it up. On that tax return, there is a SEP contribution. Would that be something that would flag your mind as to whether or not that contribution was actually made?
I would only
Timely.
question it to the extent that I would have questioned it had I prepared the original return.
Okay.
I'm not going to re-audit the return.
Well,
I'm not going to audit the return even if I prepare it. But I'm going to ask reasonable questions in the interest of my client.
well, Mark, have you ever prepared a tax return and said, okay, your SEP contribution this year is going to be X, and you've got, now you put that return on extension, and here the return is there, is waiting for them to sign to fund that SEP, and then you're going to file it.
You know, I'm laughing a little bit because I can't tell you the number of times that I've had that, you know, that corporate client where he set up the liability on the balance sheet for the, you know, retirement contribution payable, and then we did the books next year, and it was never paid. And they said, "Oh, was I supposed to do that?" And of course, at that point, you're going back, you're amending an entity return, the flow through, you know, to the individuals with the shareholders or partners. It always becomes a little bit more of a problem. So we kind of got in the habit in our office that if we set up that extension or that payment to a retirement plan, we won't actually hit the e-file send button until we have confirmation from the client that the deposit was made. Not we're making it tomorrow or next week, but deposit made, you know, into the account, so that we're not ending up with that same problem. And it's not a big routine to get that confirmation. It's a much bigger routine to not get it and not have it being made.
Do you give them a copy of the return while you're waiting?
Well, ask the question out loud.
Oh, great question. Do I give my clients a copy of the return while I'm waiting? I've never had a problem giving my client a full copy of a return before I get paid, because I don't deal with a lot of sketchy clients. Ones that aren't going to pay for the work, it's just not my client base. If I was in that realm, I might have to adjust. I know a lot of firms that have always been, you know, you're going to have to pay me my full fee before I'll even let you see the front of your 1040. I'm not in that type of relationship with my clients. I'm in a congenial, working together relationship, not a not one that's that much adversarial that you have to make sure you're paid before any services begin.
Hold on, I want everybody to make sure they followed what that conversation was all about there, because Laura asked the question, does Mark give the returns out before he gets paid for them? And we all have that choice to make. You know, do we, and it really probably depends on how transient, I think is the best word to use, our business is. I am not looking for any more clients personally. I get blessed with one or two every year, and I take them and I rate all my clients and A, B, and C. And this is just a little side note here for practice management side of things. I rate my clients A, B, and C, and when I get a referral, the first question I ask is, who referred you? Well, Natalie is an A client, and if she referred them, I'm going to talk to you. Mark is a C client. If he referred you, I'm sorry, I have no more room in my calendar this year. That is the way, you know, so think about it like that, and think about how your engagement letter is written up. Does your engagement letter say, I need to be paid before I file that return? Or do I need to be paid before I present that return, or when I present that return? And Laura, jump on this, because this is a good conversation.
So in our case, I have a lot of temp staff that does our administrative work. I don't release returns until it's paid for, because I don't want there to be a situation where it goes out the door and then nobody's ever billed or paid. I do review on screen the return with the client. They've seen absolutely everything. With regard to the SEP situation, where have they funded or not, I tell my clients, your return is not complete until that is funded. I am not giving you a copy. We can go through it, but my copy is assuming you make that full contribution. Many of my clients, I've got one right now where this year everything's down a lot from last year. So they want to make everything they can, but they're waiting until the last day they're going to stress me out, but they're waiting until the very end to see how much of it they can make. I'm not giving them a copy of that return because it's not complete until I know what they really funded. So that's where, if that was the issue with the 23, 24 not filed, they didn't have a piece of paper to look at to give someone else. But they have seen the return on screen. I screen share with, this best thing about COVID was this whole electronic stuff where people can see the screen right in front of them and see every line of the tax return with me. They know what's on there. They get to ask their question, but they don't get the papers until they pay for it.
So I have to say something here.
He who does not prefer
No
tax
one,
returns.
I don't start any services until I'm paid. Okay? So these issues don't really impact me because I am paid in full, at least my firm minimum, generally the whole fee before I even start looking at documents. Because I don't like the R word, receivable. It's a dirty word. Since 2018, I have had barely any receivables with my policy that you pay in full before I even start work on your file.
I think the thing that we're all setting up here is guardrails. We've set up guardrails for making sure we're doing accurate returns. We're not doing returns that have like problems where mine, where the amount wasn't paid at all, or yours in full, and even better in your case, where you're not paid in full. So I think that actually makes a lot of sense. It's now for our practice management is making sure you set up the guardrails that make your practice best for you.
Especially if you're like me and my clients generally don't even pay the IRS. I need to protect myself. So I'm always paid first because they're all delinquents. They don't file returns. They're on your audit. They owe $1 million. They have a levy. I have to come first.
Let's take a poll, and feel free to participate or not. But I'm just curious because this became a little different conversation than I thought we were going to, and I think it's great. But let's take a poll. How many of you take a retainer before you even look at the work? How many of you get full pay before you push the button? How many of you get full paid before you give that return in hard copy or transmit it electronically? Not bad, not bad. How many of you are building on bad debt? You're still working for that same really good client that's not paying you. That's building on bad debt. Think about that. Wow.
Where do you skip?
I'm sorry?
Where do you put that really good client who's not paying you? The A, B, C, Z?
I don't have any D clients.
Okay.
And I only have 2 or 3 C clients this tax season, which will not be clients next tax season. Because I learned that if I can't bring you from a C to a B, you can go and bother somebody else. And I think it's good mentality for all of us. How many of you in this room today had a very easy tax season? And you only prepare 3 returns, right? Realistically, we have a little bit of stress in our industry. We work too long. Having that wrong client is like having that wrong employee. I had a manager a long time ago, an owner, when I was managing for him, say, Alan, having no employee is better than having the wrong employee. I brought that into my practice. Having no client is better than having the wrong client. Now, this is not a practice management workshop, but we might as well get something out of it since we're all here having fun, right?
There we go.
Okay, anything that we want to add to this conversation at this point? I think what it comes down to, this preparer now has 3 options. Tell their client to go back to the original preparer, find out why they were not filed. If they used one of the wonderful off-the-shelf softwares, ask them why they did not push the button, and to go back and push the button. If that preparer sees anything wrong with these returns, in their review, we are responsible as good practitioners to let that taxpayer know this should be corrected. But they should file it and tell their client, do not worry, Worst case scenario is you're going to owe a little bit more money because you did not pay it on time. Fair enough?